Good morning, everyone. It is Coffee Chats with Coach Candy, and it is Monday morning. Grab your cup of coffee, grab your tea, grab your water, grab whatever it is that gets you going in the morning. We are going to have a great conversation today. Welcome. Hope you all had a great weekend. I know for me, it was a huge weekend of rest, recharge, and recovery, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. As many of you know, I was coming off my 3-day event last week, and we had a really intimate, deep immersion space for my participants and for me, to be honest. And so, good morning, Jeff. So I want to talk about taking that time to rest and recover and recharge. The 3-day that I had was absolutely, good morning, Ruben, was absolutely one of the best 3-day events I've ever had. It went extremely, good morning, Myra. It was extremely deep, extremely intense work, a lot of shifts, a lot of movement. And whenever you create space like that, whenever you're playing full out, we always need to remember the backside of that, right? We need to remember how to replenish, how to recover, how to recharge. And, you know, I find it interesting because we have a lot of conversations in our culture around people being too emotional, people being too passionate. First and foremost, I want to, as we get into a little Monday mindset, I want to talk about the difference between passion and emotion. Passion is one of those things that really is that deep fire within you. It's that space of where you get lit up when you think about what you really love about that space, or what you think is missing, or what you kind of get fired up about because you think, good morning, Elaine, you think that there's something that's not happening that should be, or it's something that connects to your core essence of who you are. It's more of a visceral space, and it's that whole being of who we are. It's that thing that gets us up in the morning. It's that thing that gives us fire, and it feeds our purpose and mission. And so when we think about what's our calling and how we want to show up, passion is what drives that. Passion is the thing that I have a deep passion for making sure that as many dogs as possible can find homes. I have a deep passion for nature and the outdoors. I have a deep passion for serving people in the capacity that I do. And so I just want to kind of highlight what passion is for a moment, because I think, especially in the corporate space, we do a lot of, there's a lot of conversation around, you know, you're too passionate. I'm going to be one of those people that throws that gauntlet down to say there's no such thing as being too passionate. There's absolutely no, in fact, we need more passion. We need people that have bigger convictions and commitment around creating change. We need people who are willing to step up and raise a level of consciousness and leadership in this country and in the world. And passion's what fuels that. Passion's what drives that. Emotion, on the other hand, is a reaction, or is a space of feeling that shows up based on circumstances and experiences and stories and beliefs in our lives. And oftentimes those emotions are connected to triggers. Other times it's simply because we may be a deep empath. We may be someone who really connects to energy, and oftentimes we're feeling the emotions. Good morning, Sheena. We are feeling the emotions of other people. And so emotions are that space that allow us to react, allow us to demonstrate compassion, allow us to show up and really dial into what's going on for us in that moment. Good morning, Martha. And so passion is that fuel. Passion is that thing that says, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm human. I want to create something. I want to be someone of value. I have a message. I have a conviction. I have something that really drives me and propels me forward. It's that fire that gets me up in the morning, and it's the core essence of who I am. Emotion, on the other hand, is a way that you're reacting to the world around you. And it's amazing to me because most people are like, yeah, you know, you're too emotional, you need to get that out of there. And a lot of that showed up even over the 3-day. I had people apologizing for crying. I had people that were apologizing for showing up and feeling what they were feeling. And it really brought me into, as someone who very deliberately, good morning, Deborah, very deliberately allowed myself a space of deep recharge and recovery this weekend. Friday night, and I mean, I'm still a little puffy, I released. Oh, did I release? And there was a huge storm here in Austin, and I kind of joked. I probably had as many tears Friday night as there were storms going on, and it rained hard. It came down for a long time, and the entire time it rained, I cried and I cried and I cried. And I say that for a couple reasons. One, it was such a release of multitude of emotions, many of them being joy and love and gratitude, and feeling so deep in my heart about the work that I just got to do with the people that showed up, full out, wide open, vulnerable. But it was also from a space of feeling a little loneliness, feeling like I was isolated. You come from a space where you create this huge bubble, you create this place, you know, to contain and hold people. And then when everything leaves, all that energy kind of vacates your space, there's almost a feeling of loss and isolation and feeling very alone in sometimes the work that you get to do. And, you know, I found myself reflecting a lot this weekend because, like I said, we go around telling people, oh, you're too emotional, you know, stop crying. It's not, and we're so uncomfortable with emotion. Now, as I dig into this, that's not to say that you don't have a responsibility to manage your emotions and to understand your emotions and lean into your emotions so that you are not just using your emotions to manipulate or using it for everybody else to fix it for you, using it for a way to cop out. What I'm talking about is leaning into your emotions so that you can truly understand who you are in that moment, what's going on, and processing both information and moments and experiences that may be deeply touching you, either from a grief perspective or from a full-on gratitude and joy perspective. And so it's interesting to me because I watch people apologize. I watch people say, I'm so sorry, I'm crying right now. And I really want to encourage you to stop that. I want you to validate and understand that your emotions are absolutely a part of who you are. Your emotions are the only way for you to dial in and find out what matters to you, what you're experiencing, how you're growing. And when you lean into that space and recognize that tears take courage, there's courage in crying, there's courage in being able to be real and wide open and express what's in your heart, express what's in your being, and be able to release that in a way that both is cathartically cleansing and allows you to deeply connect and really reach into other people as well. And so I want to have a little conversation this morning. I would love to know your thoughts. I would love to know, you know, personally, how do you feel about emotions when they show up? Are you someone who stands in a place to say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry? Or and we're going to get into that whole space around releasing the word I'm sorry to begin with. But I'm curious, how many of you, good morning, Terry, how many of you feel embarrassed, feel like you should apologize, or feel like you should, you know, hide when you're feeling those really deep, really wide open, really vulnerable emotions? And I'm curious, what do you do? What do you do in those moments? How do you react when, and I know from when I was in corporate, I used to get those times where I get so frustrated because I was so passionate about something, or because I felt like someone wasn't listening, or I really wanted to impact something and I felt like I kept hitting a brick wall, that a lot of times I would get those tears that would just be like, oh, it's that last straw, I don't know what to do. And I used to get so mad at myself for getting emotionally connected, for allowing my passion to overflow, that my emotions got connected to it. And what I realized when I stepped away from corporate was that actually is one of my biggest gifts. I really, truly don't believe that God gave me the capacity to love in the manner that I do. And it's so big and so full out not to be able to really step into that and offer that to people. And, you know, I joke sometimes, I'm like, and I say this as a joke, but I mean this legitimately, that sometimes when my gratitude is so big, my love is so big, I feel like I'm overflowing from every area, I figure it's got to go somewhere. So that's what tear ducts were invented. You know, tear ducts were invented to help you, if something gets in your eye, it helps you, you know, get rid of whatever foreign objects in there, but it also helps you release toxins. It helps you release that overflow of gratitude as well. And sometimes you need to be able to be in a space where you give yourself permission to give yourself that cathartic cleanse. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it depends on the setting and who's in the room. Yes. And Martha, I love that you say that, because as we talked about, you know, if you watch Brene Brown's special, she talks about that vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability, and that people need to earn the right for you to be vulnerable vulnerable. So I absolutely agree. This is not to be wide open with everyone, because there are people that would absolutely manipulate you. There are people that would take advantage of that. I am talking about when you feel safe. And so again, like my 3-day event, it was a very safe environment. And so to give people that permission, we also did a little boxing. I got the sparring bags out so that they could really tap into their personal power. And it's amazing when people give themselves permission to stand in their power and acknowledge that their emotion is part of that. There becomes a shift that is really powerful when you start to own that. And the whole space around us is to own your emotions, not to dismiss them, not to make excuses for them, not to, yeah, Terry, I totally agree. My mom used to tell me to stop wearing my heart on my sleeve, like maybe 1,000 times or more, never really worked. No. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities, especially when it comes to our children, especially when it comes to when we're working in an environment with other people, is to stop telling people to stop wearing their heart on their sleeve. It goes back to the whole message, especially when you're looking at it from a business perspective. When we think about the fact that people say, oh, it's business, it's not personal. It's absolutely personal. It's humans interacting with other humans. It's humans who are bringing their stories, their beliefs, their triggers, their pain, their suffering, their joy, their gratitude, their love, their grief, all of that to the table. And so when you have multiple people coming from multiple directions, interacting with each other, and oftentimes if you're in a space where you really feel connected to the work that you're doing because you know that you're helping other people, how do you not get dialed into that from an emotional standpoint? How do you not get dialed into that from a space that says, I care, that I have a huge, massive heart that I want to put out there, and I want to make sure that, you know, I'm really touching people, that I'm really being effective, and that I'm really opening up a space for them to be able to access more. I mean, how do you not dial into that? And I just think the way we raise our kids, the way we teach things in our culture, and especially business, we've got it inside out and upside down. Because if anything, business needs more heart. Yes, not everybody does deserve to hear your vulnerability, and there's a spectrum. And I will also challenge you that if you dare to be brave and walk in that space of vulnerability more, you would allow and teach other people to do the same. Sometimes you got to be the first person to go there and risk that somebody may take advantage of it, and also know that, okay, I put my best foot forward and let my heart be wide open. And it takes courage. It takes courage to be emotional. It takes courage to really be emotional and own your emotion. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes incredible courage to be seen and stand in your personal power. And until we all start to decide how and where to do that, nothing changes, nothing shifts, right? And I don't desire to be viewed as a hysterical female. You know what? And I'm so over those stereotypes. I'm over, and the memes that keep coming out, they're so on point, and I'm over them as well. The ones that say I'm not bossy, it's leadership skills, the contradiction for men and women. And at the same time, a woman is seen as maybe being hysterical and too emotional, but God forbid if a man shows emotion, right? We are so uncomfortable with that in our culture. And what kills me is, and I know this from working especially with a lot of the corporate men I work with, they are in need of more of a release than anything. And for them to be able to dial in and connect to their emotions is one of the most liberating, one of the most powerful, and one of the most amazing shifts I've ever seen. I still remember. This is what happens from me coming off of a 3-day event. And this last one in particular just really was at a whole different level. And, you know, not only, and some of you may have seen my post, you know, you get that moment to see, catch a glimpse of your own gift. You get a moment to really reflect on the work that you get to do, but you also get to stand in a space to say, I'm deeply affected by that as well, and I need my own place to process and to allow myself to feel into my emotions. But what's amazing to me is when I get men who have been working in corporate 30, 35 years who will call me crying. because they are so full of gratitude, because the fact that they're finally able to step into a space to express their emotions, they're having different conversations with their daughters, with their kids, with their spouse. And when you recognize that we're missing opportunity to connect, we have such a culture that is disconnected right now. And the reason we're disconnected is because we're so afraid of emotion. We're so afraid to be vulnerable. We're so afraid to put ourselves out there. And the thing is until we choose to do that, we keep having this very sterile, this very disconnected, this very complaining and commiserating space, and this very deep space of entitlement and prejudice and privilege and all of these things, because we're not having the bigger conversations. We're not leaning into what's in our heart. We're not leaning into the fact that there's so much suffering and grief and pain right now, and people feel lonely despite being more connected than ever in terms of technology, and we're losing the capacity to lean into the emotions, to have conversations around the emotions. And so let's see, Elaine, if only corporations would learn that it's okay and not criticize when someone opens up. Keeping things in is so harmful. Yes, and it takes the leaders recognizing that and saying it's not acceptable anymore. I remember when I got introduced at one of my corporate trainings, and the leader that introduced me said, okay, y'all, this is going to be, the next 4 hours is going to be the soft and fuzzy portion of the program. And I said, I got up after him. And very high level leader in the organization, I said, no disrespect, but that's absolutely what I'm going to sit here and break in terms of the myth. I said, I'm going to show you single-handedly why this is your single most critical asset, and we're done calling it soft and fuzzy right now, from now on. And he said, okay, we're done calling. And it was one of those spaces that when I challenged him there, and when we got into a deep space around vulnerability, he ended up standing up in front of a group of 40 leaders and broke down as he shared a moment that he chose to get vulnerable with his team, and the difference it made in terms of how they showed up with him. And it had to do with some things that were very personal to him. And he said, Candy, I got to interrupt you for a minute because I really need to share this. And he stood up and shared this moment, and the tears flowed. And what happened was, in that instant, it gave permission to every one of those 40 leaders in the room that they could dial in, that they could ask for help, that they could share what they were feeling, that they could be vulnerable. And Elaine, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it takes one leader stepping up and saying that it's not acceptable for us to keep pushing that down. It's not acceptable for us to keep suppressing emotion when we're human beings who have emotion. And what we need to do instead is create a space and a container where people feel that they can lean into life, they can lean into who they are, and they know that they have a supportive environment around them. And so, Carrie, I'd say if you're screaming and crying every day, you may be hysterical female. Short of that, you're human. Yes, you're human. And by the way, a few tears does not make you hysterical. And there are ways to combat that when somebody's like, oh, you're being too emotional. And you're like, and one of them is to simply say, so help me understand. And I'm so a fan of that phrase in every capacity. Help me understand what too emotional means. Are you saying that it's inappropriate for me to express an emotion as a human being who's having a very difficult time and reaching out to access some understanding, some compassion? Help me understand what it means to be too emotional, because I'd really like to know, and I need to know whether or not this is an environment that's going to support me in being a human being, or if it's an environment that's going to tell me that that's not acceptable, which probably means I need to go somewhere else. But there's a space of understanding and asking, and what happens is we allow. And so here's the owning your emotion. Morning, Peyton. Yeah, he was barking in the background. But here's the thing that I want you to understand is it's always about personal responsibility. And when you lean in and own your emotion, you don't let someone else tell you whether or not your emotion is good or bad, whether or not you're hysterical, whether or not you're overreacting. You get to then qualify and clarify where they're coming from. Because more often, if you take that pause and you really lean in and understand, people are challenging you because your emotion is making them uncomfortable. Because they've been the person that said, don't wear your heart on your sleeve. God forbid, don't show emotion. Emotion in the workplace is weakness. No, emotion with ownership in the workplace is actually quite strong and courageous and brave. And when you can lean in and show that compassion, when you can show that grace, which, by the way, I want to actually give you the definition of grace if I have it. Do I have it here? No, I have it, so wills. It is that space of being able to really connect into your passion. It is that space of really being able to open up a loving, open space for other people. And it is recognizing you as an individual. Having grace with yourself is so important. And so when you're feeling those emotions, when you're leaning into that, I really want you to start to hit the pause button and ask yourself, does this person's opinion of me, first of all, do I know, like, trust, and respect that person? Does it matter? Will it matter? Or do I need to lean into that emotion? Sometimes I lean into the emotions for other people. I'm a deep empath, and creating that energy block and making sure I protect myself in other people's emotions is also critical, because I can't fix it for them and I can't absorb it all for them, which sometimes I do inadvertently when I'm not being present. But I want you to really think about, if somebody's showing up for you, and I won't even say showing up for you, if somebody's in a space where they're not showing up for you and they're challenging you because you're being, quote, emotional, I want you to stand in your own power, and I want you to not necessarily push back. I want you to drop into that empty space that we've talked about before, and I want you to counteract and ask. I want you to say, help me understand. I want you to say, so tell me what the definition of too emotional is. Tell me, how do you handle when something like this hurts you to the core, or something like this feels like you just had a loss? Because oftentimes we judge people and we don't even know where the emotion's coming from. We judge somebody because they got emotional at work because something triggered them, but what we don't know is that they've got an ailing family member at home. Or maybe they're in the middle of a divorce, or maybe their child was in an accident, or maybe they're just struggling because something happened and their spouse lost their job, but they're struggling to pay their bills. You have no idea what people are going through, yet we're so quick to judge, and we're so quick to say, oh, and think about it, because I know I've caught myself. Think about how many times you see somebody on the street, or you see somebody in conversation at the grocery store, you see somebody at church or at work, and all of a sudden you've made a judgment because of the emotion that they're displaying. You instantly say, oh, well, they're a hot mess, or wow, they're in crazy town today, or wow, seriously, are we just going to have the tears flying all day? We make so many judgments. And so here's where the responsibility, and here's where I want you to think about going into your work. One, I want you to have more compassion, kindness, and grace for yourself, to truly lean in to your emotions. But I also want you to have more compassion, kindness, and grace for others, because you don't know where their story's coming from. You don't know what has them being, quote, emotional. You don't know what's happening behind the A track. That's all we see, right? And so it's our opportunity going into a week to express more of that compassion, kindness, and grace. And I want you to think about the fact that also, are you honoring yourself and creating the space for real rest, for real recharge, for real replenishment, and real recovery? Because when you have those big things that help you tap into who you are, help you tap into your passion, and help you tap into your next level and growth, a lot of emotion comes with that. And are you honoring a space where you can deeply create cathartic cleanse? I like to talk about this space of bless and release. And so before I go there, I want to read some of the comments. Elaine, I'm a product of holding things in from corporate environment, and I'm learning through your help that it is okay to let it out. It is so healing. It is absolutely healing. And here's the thing, we are responsible for our own healing. We are responsible, and sometimes just like pulling the Band-Aid off of a wound, you need the air to get in. Sometimes you have to wash it out with water, right? Because otherwise you're going to get an infection. And as much as it burns and as much as it's hard, some of the best things we have to do is flush out that pain. It's the same thing when we cry. It's flushing out the pain. It's flushing out the toxins. It's flushing out that space that says, I need to clear this out to open up something bigger for my next level. And so it's like cleaning out your closet, right? And so what I want you to do is I want you to acknowledge the moment. I want you to acknowledge what you're emotional about. Lean into that trigger, lean into that experience, and say, where's the gratitude in this? What can I take with me? What is it that I'm learning? What is it that I'm processing? What is here for me to dig into? And so really deeply blessed, have a massive amount of gratitude for whatever emotion. First of all, be grateful for the fact that you have emotions and that you actually can be in a space to feel things. Because here's the thing too, I want you to realize, and this is ancient philosophy that says, without knowing, the true power of suffering, one can never know the true power of joy. It's the yin and yang reciprocity of life, right? Without one side of the equation. So without understanding real grief, without feeling into grief. And I think about people that numb themselves. I had family members that, depression runs in my family, and a lot of them have spent most of their life numbing themselves. They numb themselves with alcohol or pills or antidepressant, and they numb themselves so much that they can't feel into the magnitude of the pain. And what happens is when we numb ourselves in any capacity of the pain, the grief, the suffering, we then also block and numb ourselves from feeling love and joy and gratitude. The only way that you can feel full effects of what love and gratitude and joy are is to know the opposite. And so to stand in a place to even say, this sucks right now. It's okay to say that. It sucks. And I'm so grateful I get to feel this, because I'm giving an opportunity to feel this at this depth. Because if I'm feeling the grief and the hurt and the pain at this level, that means I get to experience the love and the joy and the gratitude on the other side. And so there's always a space to stand in, to acknowledge and bless what's showing up for you. And then you can decide, is this a story? Is this a belief? Is this a piece I need to bring forward? Or can I bless and release that? And so I want you to realize when you own that emotion, it's truly standing in the place to bless and release that which you don't need anymore. And as Elaine said, it's so healing, and step forward into the work required for your own healing, because you ultimately are the only person responsible and the only person that can actually do it, to step into your own healing. And so lack of emotion in corporate makes it feel like you're in a robotic culture. Yes, and I would challenge that not every corporate environment feels that way. And so for some of you looking for a new job, or some of you unhappy in your current position, if standing out on your own isn't your cup of tea, so to speak, and you want to work, then find someone who's got a mission and a movement that you connect to. Find someone that's got a culture where they do lift up. Even cultures that I used to play in, I'm being brought back in to help them shift that culture, to help them look at a more compassionate and open and vulnerable space. And is it going to happen overnight? No. But I love the fact that there's leaders on board that understand that and want to be in a place where they can serve their people more, and they're talking about love, and they're looking at what it means to lead from love, with love, in those environments. And so just know that while we talk about corporate, not every environment, because watch the judgments in that space. Watch the space that says, corporate's broken, corporate looks like this, corporate's this robotic environment. Yes, there tends to be a lot of that out there, but there's also companies that really deeply show up for their employees, really deeply have people feel like they're connected and valued and loved in an environment. I've been blessed to work for some of those organizations. And so for you, it's a matter of attracting the space that's going to let you feel wide open and let you be who you are, and sometimes be emotional. And like I said, there's nothing weak about being emotional when you take an ownership for those emotions. When you're being emotional at every turn and you're letting everything trigger you and you're crying about anything, and anytime you tell your story you're in tears, then there's a responsibility you haven't taken to walk through your own healing. Because I loved, even when I was at Courage Ranch, the comment was, if you still bawl when you tell your story, you haven't gotten to that place of real healing. When you can tell your story without tears, that's when you've arrived at that space of your own personal healing. And so emotions are showing up as a gauge for you, as a filter, as a question. Because whenever, even Friday, I bawled my eyes out Friday, and a lot of it was for joy, a lot of it was for love, a lot of it was for gratitude, and then there were other pieces of it that I got to sit in and ask myself, wow, where's that showing up? And some of it was feeling isolated, and some of it was feeling lonely, and some of it was feeling like I do this really big work, and aside from Peyton, there was no one to talk to about it when it was over. And I felt somewhat alone in that space. And I'm being very open and honest with all of you, as you have earned that right for me to be vulnerable in that space, because like anybody else, I'm human, and it's scary sometimes. And I started doing some research on what it means to continue growing as a light worker, because I've really been called in that space with the work that I do. And there were some things that really triggered, or some things that opened up maybe a little bit of a fearful space about how big that is, and what that looks like, and how sometimes that means I have to be alone, even when it does, I don't feel like I want to be. And so there's that space, right? And you have a human moment in it that says, I don't even know. And at one point I was like, I don't even know why I'm crying right now. I just can't stop. And it was just such a cathartic space to allow myself to be in. And so I want you to honor that for yourself. I want you to actually give yourself time this week. And most of all, it's Terry, it's the immediate manager that conveys space tolerance for emotion. Absolutely, absolutely. And there's some wonderful leaders out there. There really are. Martha, my goal is to express my emotions appropriately with the right person at the right time to the right degree, in a way and for the right purpose. I want to be proactive and manage my emotions. Yes, and I'm going to actually caution you a little bit in that as well. You're looking at that, because make sure it's not somebody else's shooting around what's appropriate and what's right. It's more around where you feel safe and where you feel like you have earned the opportunity to be vulnerable, and someone can hold a container for you. Because I also want you to realize that it's okay to be emotional when it's just you by yourself as well. And so it's not about appropriate and right as much as it is about feeling safe and seen and protected and held, and for someone that has earned, or that you've asked permission. Because remember, the other thing is, we don't always ask permission to be able to share our emotions and be able to ask somebody to hold that space for us. And so it's more about, is that a space that serves you? Is that a space that feels safe? Is that a space that feels loving and open, and that someone's really going to be present and hold that container with you? That's the space that I want you to think about, more than whether or not it's appropriate and right. And so just be mindful of that language, because oftentimes that's a result of our culture, or someone else is shooting all over us around, well, it's only appropriate if you show emotion in this way, and it's only right or wrong. I want you to release those words. Those words are such triggering words in and of themselves. And I want you to think more about what serves me, what feels like a safe and loving and open and vulnerable container where I can be present and someone's going to be present with me, where I'm not going to be judged and I'm just going to be held and loved and supported. And so that's the kind of space that, when you're being responsible for your emotions, I want you to lean into where and how you can find those environments. I have found that my emotions can be contagious and can spread through a room quickly. It's part of groupthink. I want to be reasonable. Yes. And I would say the energy that we have with our emotions is absolutely contagious. And for those of you that have big energy, and I don't mean big energy like me where I can get really loud and fire up a stage and fire up a room. I'm talking about big energy where you are just resonating on such a high level of vibration that you can walk in a room and lift people up or shut them down without even saying a word, because your energy is so big. I am one of those people that I've been coached in that, even from one of my loving managers in my corporate career. She was very clear to hold me accountable in that space. And when I resisted and said, I don't want that responsibility, her response was, for someone who keeps saying, what is my purpose and how do I get to serve? When you're done with the bullshit in your head, you'll see that it's standing right in front of you. And we have gifts and we get to choose whether or not we accept them. And if you're someone that has that energy, that is a gift, and it requires a very high level of responsibility so that you are managing how you are putting that energy forth. Because for people, again, it's like venting downward. When you bring your energy in and that emotional energy into a space that people don't have the context, people aren't at the same level, you are being irresponsible, because it's no different than venting downward. And we've talked about that before. Venting is always an up and out game. It is never a downward game. And so, yes, there is a mindfulness. Yes, there is a space to be very dialed in and to be really present in your emotion, to know when you need to excuse yourself, to know when maybe you need to block or protect it so that you can show up for other people, and find those safe spaces where you can be open and vulnerable and really allow yourself to dial in and tap into that emotion. So let's see what else you guys got. I'm thinking of business meetings. Yes, and well, that's a whole nother conversation. We're going to talk about how to have more effective business meetings and how to insert and exit yourself out of some of those spaces. Jeff, I know it can make others uncomfortable when they see emotions displayed. How do you handle that? Especially in a business setting, you see they can feel helpless. So one of the things you can do, and Jeff, I think that's a great question. One of the things you can do is, if you have emotion, is simply say to people, thank you for understanding. Thank you for your patience while I deal with this moment. Thank you for understanding that I just needed to process this. And sometimes it's just that simple to say thank you. Don't apologize, because the thing I don't want you to do is go, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. No, I want you to say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to have a moment. I needed to receive that. I needed to process that. And I so thank you for your patience. So that's what you can do on the way for other people. The other thing is, you can say, I notice that you're uncomfortable. If you're moving through your process, help me understand what you're reacting to. Again, it's that space that if someone's reacting, that's about them. It's not about you. And you can decide if you're available to hold space for them. Otherwise, you can also say, you know what, I understand that this is probably making you uncomfortable as well. Would you mind if I excuse myself, because there's some things I just need to process for the moment. I appreciate your understanding, and I'll be back in a few minutes. And it's that space of saying, not now, I'm full, or that space to say, I need a minute. And what happens is we forget as adults we have permission, and that includes in your business settings, and I don't care where you work. You have permission to say, excuse me for just a moment. I need to catch my breath. I need to process this for just a moment. I'm finding myself to be really triggered, and this is something I need to deal with personally. Can we come back in 20 minutes and this conversation? You can do it at home, you can do it in your business, and I want you to realize that we need to start stepping in our personal power and have that permission to do that. The other thing is asking people's permission. Is it okay if I share this for just a moment? But the thank you and the excuse me are powerful. If you're just all of a sudden having an emotion, it's overwhelmed you, it's come in from nowhere, and you're like, you know what, right now I'm spinning. I really need to process this for a moment. I can't be present. Could you excuse me for just a moment? Could we reschedule and come back together? Because I don't know what just happened, but I need a moment to process whatever's showing up for me, whatever. That's taking responsibility. That's being a leader. On the other side of that, I want you to realize that, and this is something that showed up at my 3-day, name it and make it okay for people to have emotion, including discomfort. Absolutely. Yes, and I've seen managers vent down, and it feels very unsafe. It's always inappropriate for a manager to vent downward. It's very much a very unsafe space, because you don't know what to do, and there's nothing, and you're being put in a place that's not context. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody. You too, Martha. It's likely that others in the room wish the workplace was okay to be fully ourselves handled. Yes, when you demonstrate that, you do build trust and culture. The other thing I want you to realize real quick, and then we're going to wrap it up for today, and I'm going to bring more of this back to the conversation, is the space that if you are the person feeling just uncomfortable when someone is having an emotional, the one thing I want you to caution on is your inclination, your urge to want to touch them, reach out and fix it for them. What I want you to do is, the best thing you can do as a leader is to allow them to process whatever it is they're feeling, and wait until they've processed, and then ask them for what they need. And I say this because this showed up at my 3-day in January. Big, huge conversation. I'm going to bring that example back for another day, but it really came down to someone felt very offended when she said, I couldn't reach that person, and I felt like I needed to help her. She was grieving, and I said, and your need to reach out to her is about your discomfort, not hers. And it ended up being a spiral downward where this person felt attacked. This person was very offended at my response. And I really want you to recognize that when you have a need to reach out to fix it for someone, to hold them, to comfort them, that's not to say that you can't be compassionate. When your immediate response is, I need to touch them, I need to hug them, I need to fix them, know that that's about you, that's not about the other person. Because I want you to be mindful that when someone is having an emotional reaction to something, I am a person that processes externally my thoughts, but I process feelings internally. And I am a highly charged person when I am first being triggered by something. And I have a space where I need to be able to walk into my vulnerability. If someone touches me when I'm processing feeling immediately, I completely shut down. And there are people that do that. And I know that somebody who's always out, I'm a person that really retreats if someone touches me when I'm first processing. I need someone to give me space. And I've had people go, can I give you a hug right now? And I'm like, no, please don't. Because I am not prepared, because touch is my #1 love language. And when someone touches me before I'm fully okay with my own vulnerability, it is absolutely, it spirals me quickly. And I know that. So we need to be more responsible to ask permission before we simply reach out because we're uncomfortable. And so when others are being uncomfortable, absolutely name it, as Terry said. Say, I notice that there's some discomfort around my emotion right now. Thank you for holding the space that you can. And I'm going to ask if I can excuse myself so that I can process, so that I can come back and be present. And I want you to realize that you have a responsibility there to acknowledge and make the decision on whether or not you want them to stay in the discomfort or whether or not you're going to remove yourself. And on the converse, when someone else has experienced emotion and you're uncomfortable, really watch wanting to step in and fix it in any capacity. That is not your job. Your job is one of twofold: to give them the space by themselves to process and excuse yourself, or to simply sit and hold space and let them process. And when you feel that they have arrived there, then you simply say, how can I help you right now? Do you want a hug? Do you want me to leave? What is it I can do to help you as you're processing this emotion? And you ask permission. And it's one of the things in my upcoming Facilitator to Coach training program that I'm putting together, is that is one of the things that I'm going to help people learn that skill, because there is a skill and it requires a lot of practice, but it also requires you being present and getting out of yourself in that moment and showing up and being for that person. But just know that when you have that urge to reach out, that is not about the other person as much as it is about your own discomfort. And so for you to be able to sit in that discomfort and simply wait and then ask permission from that person who's having that emotion, that is the best way that you can serve somebody. And so, Jeff, I hope that helped answer your question. It's likely that others in the room wish the workplace, I already read that. Yes, good morning, Shirley. Jeff, but when you ask to leave the meeting, does that show to others that you're unable to handle the issue in a controlled way that you're emotional about? We all know that leaders, according to today's word, need to have control and offer security. You can address this tomorrow if you want. Yeah, let's bring that tomorrow. Actually, that is what I want to bring back tomorrow, Jeff. That's a fantastic question, and I have several thoughts about that. So I'm going to come back. Let's pose that question tomorrow. Good morning, Renee, because I absolutely agree, and there is a judgment. And I'm going to help you navigate through some of that judgment potentially as well, because it's also calling other leaders to the table to stand in their own vulnerability and to stand in their own triggers. Because again, a lot of that coming back is not about you, it's about someone else feeling uncomfortable. But I want to bring that back tomorrow. I think that's a great training that we can do. Let's talk about some language. Comfortable moments and what to do when even that doesn't work. How can you mitigate some of the space of that and the energy around that? And so a fantastic question. Jeff, don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of vulnerability as it can offer opportunities of breakthroughs, but the cynicism of the world today does not follow that approach. Wholeheartedly agree. And I'm going to say that until we step up, until someone chooses to be different in that space, you demonstrate nothing. And I'm going to give you some very clear examples of where that showed up with the work that I've done in corporate. I'm also going to show you, like I said, I'm going to share with you some language, some ways that you can mitigate that, and ways to push back and challenge that's respectful, that's not coming from an emotional space. And sometimes it's waiting until the emotion has dissipated to come back and have what I call the XYZ equation, but to come from a different perspective to really hold people accountable. And that word in itself, and, is going to be very powerful in that conversation as well, because you're going to be able to ask some questions of people and let them step into an answer, because sometimes it's a matter of we're not in the right culture, and sometimes it's a matter of what Terry said, is that everybody's looking for that space and nobody's willing to step up and be the first one to play. And so talking about how to manage that space is a perfect conversation for tomorrow. So let's come back to that tomorrow. And the #1 business skill needed for companies to excel is empathy. Excellent time for a teachable moment. I couldn't agree. Yes, I would like to talk more about the fine line between crucial conversations of keeping people accountable and to not walk away from those because of emotions. Perfect. So that is exactly where we're going to pick up tomorrow. We could definitely dig in for longer, and I want to be cognizant of people's time. And it gives me a space to really think about how I want to bring this to this group. But yes, that is exactly where we're going to pick up tomorrow. We're going to pick up on how to have what I call courageous, connected conversations, how to step up and have the bigger leadership conversations, and the ones that demonstrate vulnerability where emotion is warranted and where emotion is not. And we're going to talk about how to do that, how to push back, and how to challenge other people who may be judging, making assumptions, and I can even show you ways to bring it back from a pragmatic standpoint that connects it to the organization's numbers and the organization's overall objectives and what it's costing them in terms of the depleting returns when they're not. And so we can really dig into that. I think this is such a powerful conversation, and this might even be our theme for this week because it really will roll into, and it leads me to already knowing what book I'm going to feature. It's one of the most amazing reads on Friday. So I think this is going to be our theme this week. This isn't a conversation we're going to be able to just have in one day. So absolutely going to come back to that tomorrow. Myra, I think there are times when you have to get people to actually talk and be in those emotions versus hiding, ignoring, pushing away, and creating more. Yes. Yes, 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 and that is what I call courageous, connected conversations. And this idea of managing conflict, which says, oh, we want no conflict in the workplace, is bullshit. And I'm going to talk about how we need to invite and facilitate healthy conflict, because there is always conflict. And the only way real communications happen is when you put conflict on the table and you allow people a safe space to be heard and seen in that environment, to dig into where everybody is coming from and where the triggers are at. So I'm going to give you some tools around how to have those courageous, connected conversations. And that is what we're going to dig into this week. So for those of you that really want to have access to these tools, make sure that you're joining us every morning, or at least watch the recording afterwards. But that is exactly where we're going to pick this up tomorrow. The training moment is on how to manage and facilitate conflict and how to have these bigger conversations where emotion is charged, and how to do that in a way to honor the emotion and have a conversation that pulls the emotion out of that space. And so I love this, you guys. We do Brave Space. Oh, I love that. Brave Space, absolutely. So I appreciate you guys digging in today, and we're going to come back and have a even more powerful conversation tomorrow. So if you've got questions, or if you have specific kind of scenarios or things, what I would offer and suggest for this to be even more powerful tomorrow is please share those. Either send them to me personally. You can send them in an instant message, or you can send them on the page, or even in this thread. I'm going to go back and really dig in, but I want to make sure that I'm answering your specific questions. And I want to make sure if you're giving me, for instances, where I can give you the best tools and the best strategies to help you in those spaces. So I want to show up in the biggest way possible for you. So the more you give me some thoughts around what you're specifically looking for, or examples of where you've been feeling shut down, let me know, because those are the things that I'll bring tomorrow to our conversation and make sure that we're digging in and giving you the strategies that will be applicable to those very things. So if that works for everybody, good morning, Kathy. Then we are going to, oh, excellent, thanks, Jeff, versus safe space. Yes, changed everything. I like that. Brave space instead of safe space. And if you go back into what Brene Brown said, courage is never comfortable. Being courageous is not about being comfortable. And when you think you need to be comfortable, you're not having a big conversation. But I also want to make sure you have the tools to have those in a safe space, that you feel safe in, the brave space, I should say. So yes, please send me your comments. Please send me your questions. Please send me your scenarios. We will be digging into this deep this week. I think this is a great conversation, and I love all of you participating so full out. It starts with us. It starts with each and every one of us having the more courageous, the brave conversation and creating those spaces. And so I'm looking forward to digging in with y'all. This is the work that I do, deep work that I do with corporate organizations and independent organizations here. So would love to bring those tools to all of you and help you show up from a more purposeful and higher space. So with that, everybody, I love you. Looking forward to digging in deep with you tomorrow. In the meantime, again, send me any questions or thoughts you might have to help prepare for a really rich and meaningful conversation tomorrow. I love you all. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.